Lord, what a morning. My Lord, what a morning. Oh, my Lord, what a morning. When the stars begin to fall, you hear the birds above singing God's great gift of love. Look into the new day come, when the stars begin to fall. My Lord, what a morning. My Lord, what a morning. Oh, my Lord, what a morning. When the stars begin to fall, no more the children cry. When our souls are free to fly, look into the new day come, when the stars begin to fall. My Lord, what a morning. My Lord, what a morning. Oh, my Lord, what a morning. When the stars begin to fall, there's love in everyone, our glory shining like the sun. Look into the new day come, when the stars begin to fall. My Lord, what a morning. My Lord, what a morning. Oh, my Lord, what a morning. When the stars begin to fall.
Good morning. Welcome to our service from the Unitarian Universalist Meeting House in Springfield, Vermont. We welcome those who are zooming in locally from Springfield or elsewhere in the southeast corner of Vermont, as well as to our extended community who are joining us from afar. We are a multifaceted community, and we're glad you are with us this morning. We are a covenantal community where we have promised to care for and to learn from each other. Together, we seek to deepen and broaden our faith and our understanding. Your joining us today will enrich our covenant and our ever-widening community. My name is Bob Allman. I'm one of the trustees. If you're a guest today, we invite you to simply enjoy being with us. You are welcome to join us after the service for our virtual coffee hour discussion time. At the end of the service, there will be a time for announcements and an opportunity for guests to introduce themselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Wonderful. And I want to say a special welcome to Vernon, who's tuning in from the Black Forest in Germany. Great to have you with us. And to Judith, Julane's mom, who's tuning in from Florida. Great to have you with us as well. So welcome to our time of worship. Sharon will start us with the bell. And the words for our chalice lighting are from that great Unitarian abolitionist, William Lloyd Garrison. he says, "My country is the world, and my countrymen are all humankind. My country is the world, and my countrymen are all humankind." Welcome to our service. We are absolutely delighted to have you with us on this gorgeous spring day. We are on a journey as the Springfield Meeting House. We are exploring real relating, how to be in right relationship. And we are looking at what is out of sync in our world, particularly in America. And as we've explored in these recent months, we've come to understand that we're living in the heritage of the Civil War and all that entailed. And to become a harmonious country, to become the kind of people we want to be, we have to make peace with our past. And I'm so grateful, Jane, that you have agreed to be with us today. Jane Williamson is a historian, a Vermont historian, and her specialty is abolitionism. I think, Jane, you know more about it than anybody else in the state and anybody I've met. Jane got her degree in historic preservation from the University of Vermont up in Burlington. And she's done research on abolitionism and the Underground Railroad in Vermont, uncovering various sites and is currently doing more research in that area. Jane and I met, I think it was maybe 5 years ago or so. I went to a presentation right here locally in Bristol that she gave, and I was just really taken by it. And there's so much overlap between our traditions of Unitarianism and Universalism and the abolition movement. And so it's exactly who we are, and to look at our past and see where we've come from that can give us hope to where we're going. So thank you for being with us today, Jane. Really, really delighted to have you with us. So let us sing together. Our opening song, How Can I Keep From Singing? There's one line in it, to prison cells and dungeons vile, our thoughts to them are winging. When friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing? And that line especially reminds me of the abolitionists who cared deeply about all those who were suffering. And they put their lives on the line for it. So let's sing this song and go into our time of worship together. Thank you, Julaine.
My life goes on in endless song about God's lamentation. I hear the rhythm far off hymn that is the new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ring. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? Although the tempest round me roars, I know the truth will live. Although the darkness round me comes, something my light to give. No storm can shake my inmost calm. Woe to that rock I'm clinging. Since love prevails in heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, friends rejoice both far and near. How can I keep from singing to the birds that sound of the thoughts to them are ringing, cleanse my shame, my undefiled, how can I keep from sinning?
Thank you so much to Julaine and the virtual choir for putting that together for us. A perfect way to start our time together. Well, I have a story I want to tell you about a little boy named William. He lived more than 200 years ago. He was born in 1805 in Massachusetts. And when William was little, his father went away, and his mother, who was a very, very devout Christian, raised him. And he had a kind of a difficult time to start off with when he was a kid, because they needed money. He had to work. And so the first thing that he did, he was sent as an apprentice. And his first job as an apprentice was as a shoemaker. And this is a picture of a shoemaker back then. And a lot of it's hard work. You may never think about it, how hard it was back then to make a shoe. It was too hard for him. He couldn't do it. He didn't last very long in that job. That was rough. And so next thing, he became a cabinet maker. And he was like maybe 10 years old then. And this was too hard. All that sawing and hammering. The poor little guy, it was too much for him. But he needed to make money. And so next thing he tried was typesetting. Have you ever seen this? What he's doing, he's got little stamps that have all the letters of the alphabet and different kinds of things. And you line them all up, and you make newspapers and books and stuff like that. Diane, did you by any chance bring a typeset thing for us?
Rubber stamps.
Oh, you want to show us?
It's the same idea. Yes, I have.
Okay, Deb, can you highlight her? Yeah, great.
Okay, so yeah, this is just a very simple rubber stamp set. And of course, if you're going to do a whole newspaper, you have to have, many sentences and lots of words, and they're a lot smaller than this too. But it's the same idea.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it prints out the opposite way of what you're looking at. So that's a trick.
So what we're seeing there, it looks right. But if you turn it, So if you turn it over.
Let me do another letter. That would show better. So here's an F, although that hasn't gotten used, so it's not dark on it. Here you go. So G, but then on that side,
backwards.
It's backwards, right?
And so the person who's making a typeset, you almost have to learn how to read backwards. It's pretty amazing. So that's what William. Thank you so much. Appreciate that, Diane.
Sure.
Thank you. So you can unscreen share her. And so what little William, he spent 7 years from when he was like 10 years old at learning how to become a typesetter. And this turned out to be his calling for his life. So I have a question for you. Let's pretend this is a sword and a fountain pen. Which is more powerful? You can think on that. We'll come back to it. So little William, go back to my screen share here. Oh, the black flies are out. Ah, go away. Yikes. Okay, so he grew up to be William Lloyd Garrison. So when he was a very, very young man, he bought a newspaper. He was only about 20 years old. He was an apprentice for all those years, learned the trade, became a really good printer and editor. And then he borrowed some money and he started a newspaper. But he quickly got in trouble because he published things in the newspaper that people didn't like. He started saying it wasn't right for people to have slaves, because in that time, there were people who thought they owned people of a different color skin. They thought they owned Black people, and they made Black people work for them for free. And this guy said, no, that's wrong. That is wrong. We shouldn't be doing that. And so that paper failed. He actually lived for a while in Bennington, Vermont. He worked for a newspaper there. And then he went on to start a newspaper called The Liberator. And it was dedicated to anti-slavery, to abolition. And this was back in when did he start it? It was on my last slide, that's some typeset. I forgot that one. So that's what he was working with. That kind of stuff. 1831 is when he started The Liberator. And he published it, and he got in a lot of trouble. They even tried to kill him once for it. And he didn't make much money. It was always a hardship. And at one point, when he was getting started, he didn't have the money, what he needed to pay for his business. But he was saved by this guy, James Fortin, who was a sailmaker, from Philadelphia. I've got a typo there. And he gave William Lloyd Garrison, he gave him $54. That was like a lot of money, almost like $2,000 for The Liberator. And without the friendship between James Fortin and William Lloyd Garrison, the newspaper would have failed. We've talked about race amity. People of different color skin can be friends. And that in these race amity friendships, great things happen. And it changes the world. Well, Jane's going to tell us more about William Lloyd Garrison in a minute, but another person, and the Liberator. So this newspaper that he started, The Liberator, it was powerful. It was really powerful. And he said when he started it, I'm going to go for it. I'm not going to mince words. I'm going to tell it like it is. And his newspaper was really important in educating people about what was really going on, how slaves were being beaten and killed and harmed, how wrong it was. This guy, through his paper, with help from his friends. And one of his early friends was Frederick Douglass. Somebody gave Frederick a subscription to The Liberator. And Frederick said, whoa, that changed his outlook. He read in there really intelligent, accurate criticisms of slavery. And it was just like a balm for his soul to read other people writing about how bad it was and what his experience was like. So, and they were friends for a long time. They had a falling out at one point because William Lloyd Garrison thought the non-slave people should get out of the Union, didn't believe in the Constitution. And Douglass thought, nah, maybe that's not the right way. But toward the end of their life, they mended their friendship. And another example of race amity, people of different colors being friends. And Frederick Douglass helped William Lloyd Garrison and William Lloyd Garrison. It was William Lloyd Garrison who recognized Frederick Douglass as a great orator and gave him the push to make his way, take steps. And Frederick Douglass Wow. If you don't know his story, that's for another time. It's worth learning his story. So this is a statue. William Lloyd Garrison, the Boston area. And it has on the base of it that quote that I read to you: "My country is the world, and my countrymen are all humankind." And many people said of him, the abolition movement wouldn't have been without him. So I want to come back to that question: which is more powerful? Which is more powerful? There's a quote from another abolitionist from England who says, "The pen is mightier than the sword." The pen. What we write, what we express, what we say is more powerful than the sword. The sword, you can hurt somebody, but you can't really change hearts and minds. But the pen can do that. And William Lloyd Garrison told us how. But I have a question. What do you think made William Lloyd Garrison tick? Why did he do what he did? Jane will tell us more about that in a minute. So thank you for listening to my story of that great Unitarian abolitionist, William Lloyd Garrison. So you can join me, if you would, in our affirmation. This affirmation was written by a person from Barre, Vermont, L. Griswold Williams. What are we all about? We're about love. That is the foundation of our community. So join me. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve the needs of all beings to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with the source of our being. And that image is from the sanctuary in the Springfield Church in Springfield, Vermont. Time for some more music. We're about to sing a shaker tune, "'Tis a Gift to Be Simple." And this is from the same era. And the Quakers were really, really big in the abolition movement. The Shakers were not. As Jane was telling me the other day, the Shakers, they were kind of recluses. They lived in their communities, and they didn't want to get involved with the nonsense of the world. I kind of don't blame them. But the spirit of this song, simplicity, that we can come around, right? We can do this. We can come around to right relationship. So Julaine and the Virtual Choir have prepared this beautiful song for us. "'Tis a Gift to Be Simple."
"'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, we'll be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning we come round right. 'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, we'll be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn, turn will be our delight. To our turning, turning we come from right.
Thank you so much, Julaine and the virtual choir. So Deb, if you could put Jane and I up on the screen. I am so grateful that you're with us today, Jane. And Jane knows so much about William Lloyd Garrison, as she and I have been talking, learning more about him and his amazing life. And one of the reasons I'm particularly interested in him, my husband is related, his ancestor is William Lloyd Garrison. And I forgot to mention, William Lloyd Garrison didn't write down things and then do the typeset. He could typeset extemporaneously. So he wanted to be sure that nobody changed his words. So he did it himself, and he didn't write it down on paper. He went right for it. He was an incredibly powerful man, one of the many, many important figures in the abolitionist movement. So Jane, fill us in. Tell us all about. Share some of your knowledge in the next 25 minutes. So Deb, you can take me off the screen and we can focus on Jane. Thanks.
As Mellon said, I was at Rokeby for many years, where I had the privilege of doing a lot of research on abolition and slavery in the Underground Railroad. But I was reminded you're all involved in this Civil War sort of exploration. I put this talk together back however many years ago, during the 150th centennial of the Civil War, because I really wanted to bring this part of the history leading up to it out. And it was a Civil War celebration, but Americans had been arguing about slavery since the Revolution. That was the central conflict of our young country. But then something happened in the early 1830s. The argument took on a much more heightened intensity and urgency because there was a new breed of abolitionists who were demanding immediate emancipation, and they refused to compromise. Now, this was the first movement, and that's a modern term, but I'm using it, a movement that really focused on public attitudes. The radical abolitionists understood that influencing public opinion was the key to making change in a democratic society. And for the next 3 decades, they slowly dragged Northern public opinion into the anti-slavery camp. Some historians have called these years the war before the war, just so that you know I stole that title. That's how intense this conflict was. I think it's important for us to study this time and these people because they were arguing about the most fundamental questions. Would the United States continue to condone and prosper from slavery? Were Americans of African descent citizens? Could they ever be citizens? And what exactly did the founders mean when they declared that all men were created equal? So today I'm going to tell you a little bit about the radical abolitionists. Oops, I guess I have to do it this way. This is Rowland Thomas and Rachel Gilpin Robinson, Quakers, abolitionists, and sheep farmers who sheltered fugitives from slavery on their farm, which today is Rokeby Museum. These radicals were not the first ones to call for an end to slavery. During the American Revolution, which was really waged using the rhetoric of liberty and justice, excited quite a bit of abolitionist thought among white Americans, but especially among Black Americans, both free and enslaved. There was a broad consensus at the time that slavery was a necessary evil. You'll read that term a lot, necessary evil. But they also believed that it would die out. And in fact, of course, in the North, slavery did end in the years following the Revolution. Vermont's famous Constitution is a perfect example of this time, 1777. It was right in step with Revolutionary era thinking. It prohibited adult slavery, and we're so proud to say in Vermont, it was the first jurisdiction ever to be founded on that precept. But we rarely acknowledge that it also tolerated childhood slavery. And that put it in line with mainstream opinion at the time, which called for gradual emancipation. Gradual emancipation left most people enslaved until adulthood, and many for their entire lives. So this new movement broke sharply with the past. It was fueled by the evangelical and perfectionist Christianity that had swept the country in the 1820s. These were ordinary people, but they were very loud and they were very demanding. Their strategy was one of noisy mass action. They attacked slavery by appealing to the American conscience, by challenging the hypocrisy of holding slaves in the so-called land of the free, and by mounting a moral crusade meant to transform public opinion. William Lloyd Garrison, as we have heard, formulated the ideas of radical abolition, and then he established a newspaper to be sure they would get wide circulation. The first issue of The Liberator, and this is the first issue, appeared in January 1831. It remained the leading abolitionist paper for the next 30 years. Garrison published every Saturday and never missed an issue until the end of the Civil War in 1865. William Lloyd Garrison set the tone for this new movement when he announced his publishing venture. Here's what he said: "I will be as harsh as truth and as uncompromising as justice. On this subject, I do not wish to think or speak or write with moderation. I am in earnest. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will not retreat a single inch, and I will be heard." Publication of The Liberator was followed by a frenzy of organizing. First, the New England Anti-Slavery Society in 1832, and then the American Anti-Slavery Society in 1833. In 1834, 120 Vermonters gathered in Middlebury and founded the Vermont Anti-Slavery Society. This was the first state to form an auxiliary to the national organization. This is the manuscript record of that meeting and of all of their first few 3 or 4 years meetings. It's held in our collection at Rokeby, and I'm going to be quoting from it today. I think the Vermonters did an excellent job of expressing abolitionist sentiment in a way that modern people can understand. The radical abolitionists employed a range of strategies and tactics in carrying out their beliefs, but they were steadfastly committed to 2 basic organizing principles: peaceful, not violent means. They were true pacifists, and no compromises. Immediate emancipation, that's it. They had little faith in the American legal and political systems, which, after all, are based on compromise. So they pretty much just ignored them. And they welcomed as members all who shared their beliefs, including Black people and women. And this was a real problem for most Americans. Garrisonian abolitionists were motivated by deep religious convictions. They believed that slavery was a sin. And for them, this was no light matter. But it had this advantage: sinners may repent and cease sinning. And that is what the abolitionists sought. Listen to the preamble of the Vermont Anti-Slavery Society's Constitution. "We believe that slavery, as existing in the United States, is a crying sin, surpassed by few, if any others, on the face of the whole earth, that depriving our brother of liberty, driving him unrequited to his toil, dragging him into the market and selling him as merchandise, tearing asunder the endearing ties of conjugal, paternal, and social affection, chaining down his intellect by denying him instruction, snatching from him his all immortal hopes, and all the exceeding precious privileges of the gospel, making him the unprotected subject of a capricious master and denying him all legal redress. This is assuming authority which our Maker never entrusted to man. It is a libel upon our Declaration of Independence and highly provoking to God. The two seminal texts for the abolitionists were the Bible and the Declaration of Independence. They found pretty much all they needed to support their cause in those two. So they did not wish to provoke God, and therefore they saw only one acceptable response: immediate emancipation. That was their watchword. This is what distinguished them from all past anti-slavery schemes and also exposed them to ridicule, hatred, and sometimes violence. Again, the Vermonters put the matter succinctly. We do not talk of gradual emancipation because, as Christians, we find no authority for the gradual relinquishment of sin. We say to slaveholders, repent now, today, immediately. The abolitionists were also motivated by their own strong sense of duty and conscience. In no way did they duck individual responsibility for the sins of America. My last final quote from the Vermonters. We believe that the inhabitants of this nominally free state, being a part of the nation, have something to do with slavery. We therefore affirm that we are partakers in the national sin, that until we publicly enter our solemn protest against the system of slavery, we are individually criminal, that an avenging rod is already uplifted over the nation, and that the delaying of repentance will hasten the execution of vengeance. We therefore proclaim war with slavery. Our weapon is truth. Our basis, justice. Our incentive, humanity. Our force, moral power. Our watchword, onward. And our hope of success in God. So they staked out some highly principled territory on one far end of the spectrum's debate spectrum. Next, they turned to strategies and tactics. They condemned violence with the same fervor they demanded immediate emancipation. The strategy was to convert Americans, slaveholders along with Northerners, until the evil would no longer be tolerated. They relied on the power of organizing, of speaking, of the press, the petition, and the boycott. Abolitionist organizers began walking the countryside in the 1830s, arranging meetings in town after town, lecturing on the evils of slavery, and moving on after a new anti-slavery society had been formed. This is Oliver Johnson, a very important Vermonter. We should know more about him. He was a native of Peacham. He began walking across Vermont, organizing Vermonters in 1832. In 1843, Rowland T. Robinson of Rokeby organized a great convention that, if you can read, it's right here, Frederick Douglass was one of the primary speakers at this meeting held in Ferrisburg. New technologies were making printing cheaper and cheaper throughout the 1830s and 1840s, and the abolitionists took full advantage. The American Anti-Slavery Society flooded the country with abolitionist tracts, such as this one. They started with a print run of 50,000 copies a week, but by 1837, they were distributing more than 1 million, including into the South, where postmasters refused to deliver the tracts and burns sacks of mail in the streets. So if you can see, this is a drawing from a newspaper of the time. They're throwing the sacks out into the street and burning them in Charleston. The US Constitution protected slavery and the right to reclaim fugitives from slavery, but Congress controlled the District of Columbia. So ending slavery there became a focus for the petition campaign. Now, many Americans were horrified and embarrassed, even if they weren't abolitionists, that slaves were sold in public inside of the Capitol. So hundreds of thousands signed petitions demanding an end to slavery in the district. Here are two from our collection at Rokeby. This is a manuscript petition, and it says, this is a women's petition. What does it say? We, the females of. Women were very important to the petition campaign. They did most of the work. Remember, women could not vote at this time. So petitioning Congress for them was an important political act. This is a printed petition, and I really like this one because there's directions at the top how to do it. And it says, the last thing is, don't forget to cut off the directions. Fortunately, our copy is complete. Now, the last tactic I want to mention is the boycott. Economic boycotts can be successful. Many of you may remember the Great Boycott in the 70s that in support of the California farm workers. Well, boycotting slave-made goods took off in the 1830s, one more way to attack slavery. But the truth is, most people quickly gave it up because doing without cotton and white sugar was extremely difficult. And it was soon clear to the organizers that no real economic damage was going to be done. The Quakers, however, continued the boycott, including the Robinsons, and they organized to make it workable. And this is a receipt for a free labor store. You can see over on the right, free labor goods. This was a friend of the Robinsons ran this free labor goods store in New York City. The abolitionists were always a minority. Not many people accepted their radical views, or, just as important, had the courage to stand up for them. But the movement did spread rapidly across the North and across Vermont in the 1830s. There were 4 anti-slavery societies in 2 states in 1833. 4 years later, in 1836, there were more than 500 societies active in 15 states. Now, this is my little homemade, not very artful map of the spread through Vermont. The first Vermont Society was founded in Jamaica in 1833. 4 years later, in 1837, there were 90 societies. And they attempted to get a reading on the membership. They asked people to report their memberships that year. Only about half of them did, but the memberships totaled 6,000. So at that time, that was quite a few Vermonters. This, what seemed like a tidal wave of organizing to many people, it had 2 consequences. The first was backlash, which is very common with social movements, and second was internal conflict. Let me tell you, these radicals scared their neighbors. Their extreme and uncompromising views seemed to threaten the peace, the purity of the white race as it was perceived at the time, and the very future of the United States. So their opponents went on the attack. Mobs formed in cities across the North and often resorted to violence, more than 150 times in the peak year of 1835. This is a famous 1838 burning. They burned down an entire building the abolitionists had built. And Vermont was not entirely spared. In 1835, there was a mob that attacked a Vermont Anti-Slavery Society meeting. This is a noted abolitionist, Samuel J. May, who had come to Vermont to deliver an address. And he abandoned the podium because it was obvious that if he tried to speak, violence would break out. And it was held in a church in Montpelier. As the decade came to a close, anti-abolitionist violence subsided, but that was when the internal conflict escalated. As the abolitionist movement grew, it fractured. Radical and conservative wings developed, and they disagreed bitterly. They differed on the role of the church, of women, and of electoral politics. The abolitionists split at their 1840 national meeting in New York. I'm going to get one more here. When the radicals appointed a woman, Abby Kelly Foster, to a key committee, the conservatives walked out and formed a new organization, that did not include women, among other differences. The Vermont Society also split in the early 1830s. In their case, it was over the role of the church. So the abolitionist movement was fragmented, but it was not dead. William Lloyd Garrison continued to publish The Liberator. Political abolitionists founded the Liberty Party in 1840, paving the way for the Republican Party a decade or so later. And a new generation of African American leaders, Frederick Douglass, Henry Highland Garnett, Jermaine Logan among them. These men, all former slaves, took a much more militant approach and began to reconsider the role of violence, which began to seem more and more necessary. John Brown took violence to a new level with his raid on Harper's Ferry in 1859. The 1860 presidential election was a turning point. The Southern slave power realized that a united North could determine the future, and that they could not tolerate. South Carolina seceded in December 1860, and the Confederates fired on Fort Sumter in April 61, igniting the war that would bring an end to slavery at last. That's it.
Wow, what a story. Wow, that is amazing. We are the inheritors of this. I so appreciate what you've said. And I mean, as we look at movements now, whether it's Black Lives Matter or other movements, the same thing can happen of infighting, people who are thought of as too extreme or too liberal. The fractioning to keep us from being as effective. Yeah, wow. And if anybody has not yet made a trip over to the Rokeby Museum, it's worth it. It's really quite amazing. Jane was the director there for about 20 years or so, and it was a stopping point. Well, more than that, it's a complex story on the Underground Railroad. And actually, Deb, can you bring that up right now? We might as well do that right now. There's the African American Heritage Trail. So these are images of the Rokeby Museum where Jane worked. And this is the first stop on the Vermont African American Heritage Trail. So if you weren't aware of that yet, it exists. And maybe some of you over in the other part of the state or in other places would want to make a road trip and come over. I live in Addison County, so this is in my neighborhood. And learn from it. And Deb, can you bring up the African American Heritage Trail? So to help us understand more about the abolitionist movement, and more than that, some historians and other enthusiasts have created the African American Heritage Trail, and the Rokeby Museum is the first stop on that trail. Yeah, the website is vtafricanamericanheritage.net. So these are some of the sites on it. So you're welcome to check it out. If you're looking for some interesting, you who are in Vermont or not too far from Vermont, if you're looking for some interesting road trips, or maybe you're going to make a summer trip here to Vermont, these are some really interesting locations. And Rokeby is #1 right there in Vergennes, south of Burlington, north of Middlebury. So thank you so much. Yeah, worth checking out. So thank you, Jane. And Jane has graced us with agreeing to be with us for the coffee hour, so we can continue our discussion with Jane. So one of the things, it really struck me when you were saying, Jane, about the moral imperative that the abolitionists and William Lloyd Garrison's words about It's a sin. It is wrong. It is wrong to do this to other human beings. And he said in very eloquent words, he said, to rip people from their social networks, to tear asunder the connections that these enslaved people have with each other. And it's our relationships. That's what makes it. That's what makes us who we are as humans. We need each other. We absolutely need each other. And to quote Thomas Merton, he says, in the end, it is real relationships that will save us. We've gotten disconnected from each other, from the earth, from ourselves. And our journey is to rebuild those connections with the earth, with each other, and with ourselves. So let's enter a time of this special time in our service where we share some of our joys and sorrows. And this is the glue. This is real relating. That we know each other, that we care about each other. So let's have a short time of prayer and meditation. Spirit of life, the source, the one known by many, many names. Thank you for this gorgeous spring day. And thank you for the stream of love and light that you have sent to this earth through all of humanity. Thank you for the love and the fire that moved through all those abolitionists 2 decades ago. Thank you for their courage to speak the truth against great odds. Thank you for their compassion. Thank you for their foresightedness to do what had never been done, to go across race and gender and religious lines and create real relationships with each other, one humanity. May we learn from this, Great Spirit. You see us, people arguing, people fearful, people turning against each other, people retreating in anxiety. Open the doors of our hearts and our minds and our bodies to healing. Help us heal the brokenness of our relationships. Help us sit quietly and listen to the wisdom in our own hearts. Help us interact calmly and lovingly with people who are different than us, people who have different ways of living and being in the world. Help us heal so much of the brokenness. And help us restore our relationship to Mother Earth. Somehow we humans, we've gotten a little bit lost, Great Spirit. We've forgotten the foundational truths. We are one humanity. We are one living community of beings on Mother Earth. Thank you for this community of the meeting house that opens our hearts and our minds and our bodies to new ideas, to hope. Help us restore our relationships with the earth, with the source, you, with each other, and with ourselves. And thank you for these beautiful words and stories and images from Jane that have opened our hearts and minds to new insights. Thank you for the gift of this gathering and this beautiful day. Be with us, Great Spirit. Amen. Our closing song is When You Know, and it has a history connected with abolitionism. The author of this song, Amazing Grace, John Newton, he was a slave trader. And in a big storm at sea, he had an awakening. He became fearful and he turned his life toward God. And eventually he began to realize that what he was doing was wrong. And he stopped working in the slave trade, and he wrote this gorgeous song. He became a minister and became a force of love and good in the world. He restored his relationship to himself, to the source, and to other humans. So let's sing together Amazing Grace. Thank you to Julaine and the virtual choir for producing this for us. You're welcome to sing along.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, but grace my fears relieved. A precious did that grace appear. The hour I first believed. When we had 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, with no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun.
Hear these words for extinguishing our chalice from William Lloyd Garrison. My country is the world, and my countrymen are all humankind.